evening, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are, whatever time of the day it is. Welcome back to another episode of Connecting Through Faith. It is our third episode, yay! Technically our fourth because we had one episode that was split in two, but but our third episode, and I am having so much fun talking with you, getting to know you, getting to have you get to know me a little bit and getting to know these amazing individuals that have made their stop along the way and talk to us and open up their worlds to us. It is just great. And I thank you, our viewers, and our listeners for all your questions, all your comments, and just your support. Thank you. Welcome to another week of Connecting Through Faith. This week I did a lot of listening. And one of the things that is dominating the airwaves, right, is that leaked first draft from the Supreme Court on the ruling of Roe v. Wade. Wow. How did that happen? The Supreme Court is usually airtight and they're their own boss and they patrol themselves and they don't let nobody in. So how did that leak happen? But most importantly, what is happening in this country? Now, Roe v. Wade, for those of you who do not know, it's a landmark ruling that the Supreme Court made that gave women the right to choose whether or not to carry a pregnancy to full term. A woman has the right to choose whether or not she wants to abort a pregnancy. The Supreme Court made that ruling in 1973, I believe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That's almost 50 years ago. And the Supreme Court made it so that abortion, the right to choose, is the law of the land. Well, we know how it is. Elections happen, elections have consequences, and especially the presidential elections, because one of the things is whichever president is in power, their party wants to put people on the court that are going to support their agenda and overturn things that do not support their ideologies. And so here we are, the Supreme Court, thanks to the previous president, the Supreme Court is now comfortably conservative leaning. That means there are something like 6 Supreme Court justices that lean more toward the conservative movement. So they believe that abortion is of the devil and all these other things. And so here we are, this law that has been in place for almost 50 years, that the Republican agenda has been trying desperately to overturn, now sits comfortably in their position to do so. And if the first draft is anything to go by, the law will be overturned when they make their final decisions. Now, it is important to say, as of right now, as of this day that I am speaking to you, I think this is May 11th, 2022. The right to choose is still the law of the land. But drafts can change. Oftentimes, Supreme Court justices change their minds after weeks of deliberation. Well, as you know, Connecting Through Faith is not necessarily about the politics of the moment, but the greater and the deeper conversation and consequences of the political moment, right? So what is the greater conversation and the deeper consequences? Well, pretty much, we could wake up tomorrow morning and you're told, if you are a female viewer, if you're a female listener, you are told that you no longer own the right, nor have the right to choose what happens to your body. You could wake up tomorrow morning and it becomes a thing where the United States government, like so many other countries, get to dictate to you as a female what you do with your body. Now, for me, that is very dangerous. Again, I will always say this because it is connecting through faith. I come to you from the Christian tradition. And by my personal nature, I am pro-life. Ooh, you hear pro-life and you get, oh my God, you are against abortion. I am pro-life. I'm not against anything. I am pro-life and I am pro-choice. What that means is I support a woman's right to choose what happens to her body, what she does. Why? Because I have the right to do so. If I wake up tomorrow morning and I feel like I want to remove some stuff from my body or put some additional stuff to my body, there's no law that permits me from doing so, that prevents me from doing so. For women, it could be a little bit different if this does happen. And so I am pro-choice. I believe every woman, every person has the right and it's a fundamental innate right. This is the temple. Again, I speak from the Christian tradition. This is a temple that was given to us and trusted in our care by our Creator, by the divine, my divine. And my divine commanded me to do what I will with this temple. So no one should dictate to me how to choose. It's like someone coming into my house and telling me that I can't put my television on the wall or my computer desk can't sit there. It's my house. I pay for it. Like, how do you tell me what to do with my own space? And so that's how I look at this. And when I say I'm pro-life, of course I'm pro-life. And I think almost everybody is pro-life. We value the sacredness of life. I hardly think there's any person that looks at someone that just looks at a person and say, oh, you should die. Or you, whatever. Like, most of us are pro-life. We value life. We value life. However, no one knows what someone's dealing with or going through that forces them to make a decision unless and until you are in that position yourself. Now, here is where I come from as a pro-choice person as well as a pro-life person. There was a point in my life where my wife and I had to make a decision about what is worth saving. Carrying a pregnancy to full term that we were told it's almost 99% certain that she would die in childbirth, or she wouldn't even live to carry the pregnancy to full term. We had to make a decision. We have other kids that are equally important, and I don't want them to grow up without a parent, so we had to make a decision. It doesn't mean we didn't value the fetus, the zygote at that point, because it wasn't even 3 months. That it doesn't mean we didn't value what that could have been, but it also means that a choice had to be made, and we made what we thought were the best and most practical choice in the moment. That's the position that I come from. And so my plug for today is with everything that is happening. We see the demonstrations, we see the conversations, and we hear what's happening, and it really is looking like the Supreme Court is about to make a ruling. As an individual, let's for a minute, we can't, but let us for a minute imagine it wasn't about abortion. Let us imagine for a minute, like I said, it's something as simple as someone coming into your home and telling you what and how you can and cannot decorate your home. Would that sit with you? How would you respond to that? Pro-choice or not, how would you respond to that? And that is akin, and I know it's very simplified, and please, all the different groups that are out there, do not come for me, or if you want to come for me, do so. But I'm not trying to diminish or reduce the matter. I'm simply asking us to look at it in a broader perspective when it comes on to the right for women to choose. As a person of faith, I believe that we were all adorned with innate intelligence. We were all adorned with certain rights. And a part of those rights, one of those rights is choice, the freedom of choice, the right to make a choice. If I get up tomorrow morning and I decide I no longer want to wear a burnt orange t-shirt, sweater, nobody, not Congress, not anybody should determine and make it a law that I have to wear burnt orange t-shirt, sweater every Wednesday evening. Nobody should do that. God is not that person. The God that I serve is not that person. The God that most of us as Christians talk about. God says, here is the left and here is the right. The left, the road is broad, it's smooth, it's pretty, but it leads to destruction. This is the good book now, okay? On the right, the road is narrow, it has a lot of obstacles, it's very painful. The end thereof is lined with pure gold. Nevertheless, choose which road you will take. God, the supreme being, the creator, said, here are two choices I am giving you, but because I adorned you with the intelligence and the freedom to choose, you get to make the choice. You get to make the choice. God could simply say, go right. God could simply say, you know what? I'm not giving you any choices. I'm going to just put one road and that's the way that you could go. God did not do that. What God did was gave us choice. So how is it Congress, white men, older, a lot of them old, not older, but old, white men, and some older white women who believe that because this is what was sold to them many, many years ago, centuries and decades and centuries ago, that's the right thing. That's the only thing. How is it that they come to take away our choices? What gave them the power to tell us that the one thing that we own, are bodies, that we don't get to make a choice about it? I would love to hear from you connectors about it, but this is what I'm saying. I have on the other side of this an amazing community builder, social justice warrior, racial justice champion in the person of the Reverend Bernadette Hickman-Maynard. And we're going to have some conversations. We are going to learn a little bit about Reverend Bernadette, and we're also going to learn about how her faith requires her to show up in this time. I plug, choose ye this day what you will do, saith my God. Reverend Bernadette, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us, to talk with us, and welcome to Connecting Through Faith.
Thank you so much, Reverend Andre. It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to be here. And you are such a dynamic preacher and teacher and activist and powerful witness in the community. And I'm just glad to be here. I'm glad to know you, and so look forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you. But I feel like I'm the one that's among royalty, so I'm humbled to be in your company. And can I say this? Can I call you a friend? Is it okay if I call you?
Absolutely. I would hope so.
Call you friend and sister. I love it.
Yes.
So my connectors are eager to get into it, and so without further ado, Reverend Bernadette, I almost call you Reverend Doctor, and I think it is pretty much okay and due. I know you, you're well educated, you're from Harvard, and just the work that you do. So if I slip and call you Reverend Doctor, it's not a disrespect in any way, shape, or form. It is just giving you the honor that is due to you. Tell us, if you don't mind, tell the connectors a little bit about your faith journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in a conservative Baptist church. So currently I am an AME, African Methodist Episcopal minister and pastor, but I grew up in a conservative Baptist church, and that was the name of the denomination, the Conservative Baptist Association of America. And it was, in fact, a conservative Baptist church as well. There were no women who could teach boys or men over the age of 18. Their women could not speak or preach from the pulpit. They couldn't even stand in the pulpit. They had to stand on the floor and share a testimony, or if they had an announcement, they could do that on the floor, but could not be in the pulpit. I was very much told as a girl that, my goal was to, get married and support my husband. I could work, but I had to make sure that first the children were taken care of and that my husband was supported. Theologically, it was conservative as well. Well, that showed how conservative it was theologically, but socially. But the pastor was very conservative and preached that it was, what was most important was that you get to heaven. Do you know where you're going when you die? That was the fundamental question. That was all of our evangelism. That is what we were, asked. We wanted to have the assurance of our salvation to get into heaven. That's what God cared about. And it didn't matter. Racism didn't matter as much. I grew up in Los Angeles. It was during the time of the Rodney King riots, lots of racial unrest. Pastor never mentioned it. We had to know the Bible, every dot and every tittle, know what we believed, and be able to share that with others, with the hopes that they would be saved from hell and go to heaven. That was what I was taught. I grew up, and I called myself a secular feminist, and what that meant was that I believed that God created women to could be leaders in the secular world, but in the church, God created men to lead. So I was a believer in many sense of the word when I was a kid. And then I came to Boston, and I came to Harvard, and I met my husband now, who brought me to the African Methodist Episcopal Church, to Charles Street, and a Charles Street AME Church in Roxbury. And when I got there, I had like another conversion. I saw women who were preaching and who were teaching and who were leaders. And I looked at them and I was like, oh, they don't seem to be of the devil. What's going on here? And then the pastor at that church was preaching that God not only cared about the afterlife and going to heaven, God cared about the hell that was on earth and didn't want you to experience the slavery or racism and injustice and all of these things. And so I was like, whoa, I had a completely new perspective on faith and what God cared about. And so I had another conversion, really. And I say it that way because it took me some time to reconcile what I was seeing in this Black church, in this traditional Black church. The AME Church is the first Black denomination in this country. So what I was seeing here and what I had experienced back home. For the first time, my church back home, it was a conservative Baptist church, as I mentioned before. We were in Inglewood, and Inglewood had it was all white at one point, but then the Blacks and the Latinos started moving in, and then the white people started moving out, but not all the white people. And so what happened in my church is I had a white pastor, and we had white leadership, but we had a majority Black congregation. And I call it a plantation now because it was mostly Black people, white leadership. And while there was, Black people, it was not the Black church. We could not sing gospel music. Drums were of the devil. As I said, we didn't mention racism. There was no spirituals. I didn't hear the spirituals until I got to Charles Street. All right. So then I learned a whole new faith tradition, if you will. The Black church is rooted in the experience of Black people and an encounter with God from those who experienced injustice and believed that God wanted them to be free. That was a whole new faith tradition, if you will, for me. And so, but it took time. And while I began to worship and to serve in leadership amongst the youth there, I wrestled with the concept of whether or not I could be called, right? I reconciled the fact that, okay, God could call women, but was God calling me? And I realized that in that struggle, which took place over a couple of years, I was wrestling also with the sexism within the AME church, right? And so on the one hand, there was this church that was welcoming me and women in ministry and all of this. But I'm now married to my husband, but he was a minister beforehand, and he was a couple years older than me, and he was the darling preacher boy of the church. And as I was experiencing my call, there I was sort of shut down on many occasions and told to wait until I got married and to see if I was still called. So, here I am at a church where there's liberation and we want people to be equal and women can preach. And I was being told what my previous church would have, they wouldn't have let me go into ministry, but they would have said, what does your husband think? And these people told me, in fact, to wait until I got married and to see if I was still called. So I want to say my pastor was very supportive. The pastor was not the one who told me to sit down and wait. These were lay folks. But this is just an illustration of how I have come now to be a pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, pastor of Bethel AME Church in Lynn, as well as a racial justice organizer. And it has really come from my experience of oppression, of race-based oppression, of gender-based oppression within the church in different ways, both in white church and in Black church. But it comes about, or I find myself really firmly believing in the mission of the AME Church and the foundation of the AME Church, which is one that was founded by a man who purchased his freedom from slavery, who walked out of the St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, white church that wouldn't allow Black folks to pray and to practice their faith. And they had the first Black Lives Matter movement, the first protest, walked out and founded a church. And it wasn't just a church that would talk about how to get to heaven, but rather they created schools. It was a mutual aid society. It was about how are we going to be free on this earth. There were literal stops on the Underground Railroad. So for me, my faith is about getting free, and that God wants us to be free, and that I want to work and to channel the spirit of a liberating God to help all our people be free.
You're preaching, preacher. You're preaching. It's as you spoke about your journey, I can't picture you, not the Bernadette that I know, and I've come to know these something like 5-6 years. I can't picture you in a congregation that doesn't allow women. You are again one of the most dynamic women I've come across in my lifetime, with so much gift and just so much passion for the work of freedom. And something you said that I think our listeners really want to hear is that your faith is about liberation and a God that believes in freedom. The show is not just about people who profess a faith, right? You don't have to be a member of a congregation or a denomination to connecting through faith. It's also about your moral compass. It's also about your belief system. And I love that, which I didn't know, some of the things about the ME Church, like the founder purchased his freedom from slavery. And just the fact that this this denomination in particular believes in liberation here on earth, right? I'm from Jamaica, where earth don't matter. In churches, earth don't matter. It's what happens after you die and you get there. That's what matters. Um, Bernadette, just and by the way, I do have to say I do know your husband, well-respected Dr. Teddy Hickman-Maynard, who hopefully I can get on the show at some point. Put a bug in his ear for me. And your Charles Street's senior pastor, a good friend of mine, Reverend Groover. Tell us, or tell our viewers, because I see you in action and I'm on the email chains and I know a little bit about the work that you do, but with all that you've explained and shared with us about your faith journey, how does your faith require you to show up in this moment, in this time? How does your faith call upon you to show up?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it is like as I said before, God says we must be free. Like if I go back to the scripture that is the story anyway that is fundamental and foundational for me, it is the story of Exodus. It is the story of God telling Moses to that I've heard my people cry and they shall be free. And so and Jesus Christ as the one, if I think about Luke chapter 4, when he says, "In the Spirit of the Lord has anointed me and has called me to preach the good news to the poor and freedom for the captives and recovery of sight for the blind and let the oppressed go free." That is what Jesus came to do. And as a preacher of Jesus Christ, that is how I believe I am called to act and to show up in the world. So wherever there is a cause for liberation and for freedom, there I want to be in support of helping people to be free, regardless of their faith tradition or whether they have one or one at all. But I believe that is ultimately what compels me to act and to show up in this.
I do a lot of work in the community. I do a lot of work in racial justice and equity, and I was told by my previous bishop in Jamaica that I have chosen the devil's path. That I literally, those words were used to me. That I came to America and I've allowed myself to be intertwined with the devil's on the devil's path. I've migrated from the sound principles that the church's responsibility is to preach salvation and prepare people for heaven. You are very, very visible in the social and racial justice fight. You'll probably hear me say this a million times, and if you get tired of it, I'm sorry, but you are one of those people that I love to watch and I love to listen to as you lead these charge. Why and why, one, do you do that? And how does that reconcile with your role as a pastor and your faith tradition?
Yeah, so I am a pastor of a congregation, and I see my own personal purpose. We went through a whole purpose group ministry, and my purpose is that I am a creative and energetic, a strategic thinking Black woman reformer, and my purpose is to pursue wholeness and liberation for myself, my family, and my community, and to create the conditions for marginalized people to thrive. Mm. And so as a pastor of a congregation, I see myself pastoring not just those in Bethel AME Church, but also those in the community, and that we are creating the conditions for marginalized people to thrive. We are pursuing wholeness. That means healing. That means pursuing our best selves and liberation to be free from those things that are binding us together. And so this is God's work as it is done both within the church and in the community. And it's important that I present another way, because certainly the description of church and that you talked about in Jamaica is one way. Certainly we've got the religious right in this country that are involved in politics but want to define it a particular way. And I want to show that there's another way, that there's another way, that God is calling us to be and to act on behalf of justice, and to set those. And so when I say create the conditions, that's about addressing the systems. That's address the principalities, the powers and the principalities. We must address those in our society in order for us to be free. There is no other way. It doesn't just, it's not just about the local congregation. It must be about transforming this community so that, in our world, so that everyone can thrive.
Come on, you're a preacher among preachers. You are, it's, you know, it's hard to get preachers to just talk and not preach, because you're doing a whole sermon. I love it. I love it. So as you heard earlier on in my previous segment, the plug is about, you know, the Supreme Court of the United States of America has leaked their draft. Now, a draft can change, but a draft pretty much gives a pretty clear idea as to where the court is leaning with their decision. There's a bill, there's a law in this land that is about 45 years old, somewhere there. Roe v. Wade, I think that came into being sometime in 1973 or somewhere there. So it's probably 49 years old at this point. Almost 50 years old. And what Roe v. Wade does, it gives women the right to choose abortion without it being criminalized. It made abortion legal at the federal level across this country. Now, very recently, the Supreme Court leaked their draft, because it's been brought up again, and they're leaning toward overturning this law. Now, again, this podcast is not about the politics of the day. It's not about the media conversations of the day. It's about the broader conversation, right? And for me, the broader conversation is, we are now telling people, should this law be overturned, that your body belongs to the state and the state gets to make, that's how I see it. The state gets to make a decision about what you choose or choose not to do about your body. As a Christian female, and I'm so happy that you mentioned the different oppressive things that you have transitioned through or experienced on your journey. You're female, you're a Christian, you're a pastor, you're a social justice warrior. How do you view what is about to happen, and how do you respond to this?
You know, I'm gonna, as I am a preacher, I'm gonna raise another story, which, you know, came to me about this. So as I said, you know, I am a Methodist, or AME. I'm a womanist, which is you know, a Black feminist, and I approach scripture reading it from that lens. What does the scripture have to share with us about our times? And I'm reminded of the story of Hagar. Hagar was the slave of Abraham and Sarah. Now, those are the patriarch and matriarch of the Jewish faith. And Abraham and Sarah were promised by God to have a child, but Abraham and Sarah couldn't, and so they were old. And then because they didn't want to wait long enough, Sarah decided to take Hagar, who was an Egyptian slave, so an African, a Black woman who was her slave, and gave her to Abraham so that she could conceive a child with Abraham that would be, that Sarah would then claim ownership of. And so here we have a Black woman who did not have control over her own body, did not have control over whether she would be a mother. She was enslaved, literally, physically, emotionally, and she it got to the point she got pregnant with Ishmael, and things got so bad. Sarah oppressed her even more. The word there is oppressed, not just was treated badly, but she oppressed her. And then Hagar ran away. Hagar ran away into the wilderness, and when she got into the wilderness, God appeared to her, and God said, "Go back to your mistress." So here we have a Black woman who was enslaved, who was not in control of her body, over her reproduction, over her rights at all. And she goes into the wilderness, she flees, she liberates herself, and God is telling her to go back. And I'm like, what, God, are you saying, right? And did I just tell you before, I believe in the God of liberation, right? I believe that God wants us all to be free. And then here we have God saying, go back. And as I wrestled with this text, I realized that there are these moments where, as much as God wants us to be free, as much as we need to be free, we cannot, and we find ourselves in situations of oppression, and we have to go back into them. And this Supreme Court decision is sending us back into oppressive situations. It's sending us back so that we don't have control over our bodies. It is sending us back. And so where is the good news in that? Because are we just supposed to go back and then suffer under oppression, under slavery? So in that story, after God tells Hagar to go back, God tells her that she will have Ishmael, but she is to call him Ishmael, which means I have heard your affliction. I have heard of your pain. I have seen your tears and your crying. And then later, Hagar names God and says, I have seen the God who sees me. So even as God told her to go back, and even as we find ourselves in these situations where we are sent back into, injustice and to slavery and to oppressive conditions, there is God who sees our pain and our affliction. And just seeing it and acknowledging it provides us with the strength to continue to fight. We know that we are not alone. We know that our cries do not go unrecognized. Now we've got people who are sharing more and more experiences of the back alley abortions. They're talking about their grandmothers who have died and their relatives who have died because of what happened in the past. There are more and more people who are coming forward with their own stories of abortion and their own trials and their own tragedies, and they are being seen. And as we see and we acknowledge the injustice of overturning Roe v. Wade, and the injustice of women who have not had control, and the threats that they want to continue to restrict further, the hope is that we can make it, that we can now encourage one another to continue to tell the stories, to fight, and to move on. Because the truth is that in all of our fights for injustice, we take these steps forward and we take these steps back. And this is no doubt a step back. But we need to see one another. We need to see the pain. We need to tell the stories of the pain. And then we're going to survive this. And then we're going to move forward in hopes of eventual liberation.
You almost had me speaking in tongues, lady. You are giving us life. You are giving us life. And I'm sure the connectors are just basking in your knowledge and your words. And I'm sure we'll have questions. And again, you have to come back. This can't be your last visit. You have to come back. I wonder what you say to, and this was not one of the questions that I sent to you. This was one that I'm just throwing in there now, because I thought that was so powerful, us seeing each other and understanding that it is in going back that we will find strength among each other to move forward. I wonder for those who are of a different belief system, those who are agnostics, those who are atheists, those who do not necessarily claim a faith tradition or claim a deity, but they have a moral compass that allows them to know what is right, what is wrong, what is fair, what is unfair. How do you encourage such a mother who's looking at her maybe 13, 14-year-old daughter who was raped and probably impregnated by this rapist. How would you, in all of your amazing and just dynamism, how would you encourage such a person who doesn't have that deity to hold on to and those faith stories to hold on to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just encourage her to be there and to support her in whatever way she can to have the control over her body that she deserves. I mean, quite frankly, part of the whole the piece in seeing and being there, that's true. That transcends any particular a dogma or doctrine. That there, and I would say that there is ministry in presence, right? And seeing, but you don't have to call that God to know that people are profoundly supported when they know they are not alone, and that when their own efforts for liberation are supported. And so, I don't, is the question, that this person, this mother has this daughter and it's now illegal in the area. Or what I would, my answer, I guess, in any situation would be support the efforts for liberation and be there, even if they are
The right to choose is taken away.
if their rights are taken away, right? If we have to go back and we are in an oppressive situation, then you be there, you witness and you support in every way that you can.
Yeah, yeah. Reverend Bernadette, you're amazing. You're amazing. Tell the connectors, tell them where they can find you, what are some of the things you're doing, and most importantly, because I learned this from you, and I have to say thank you. You're very big on staying grounded and self-care and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit of what keeps you grounded and some of the things you do to not carry. I had to quit the profession that I spent 15 and a half years getting educated in. I had to quit it for my mental health and my emotional space most recently, and start something entirely new. Tell us what keeps you grounded and keeps you going in times like these.
Yeah. So I would say that the idea that the airplane mask analogy, which is, if you are in a crash or is going to be in a crash, you're supposed to put the mask on yourself before you help somebody else. And so I subscribe to that wholeheartedly. And the idea that it is important for me to be healthy, but not just for other people, so that I can help other people, while that's important, but for myself, because I too am worthy of rest. I am worthy of being healthy in and for myself, so that I can live the abundant life I believe God has called me to live. So I want to say that and acknowledge that I did not always feel that way, and that a lot of my worth and sense of self-worth came in what I could do for other people. But what I have done very concretely in order to make that self-care important is my restoration schedule. And that is that I take one day a week of rest, 1 week a month of rest, and 1 month a year. Now, when I first heard about this, I read it from Peter Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And when I read that he did this, I said, well, that's a white man who can do it. A white man who has a wife who takes care of his 4 children. He's not taking care of his children. He's got a staff of 15 people running his church. So he has all the privilege in the world to be able to do this. How am I, a mother of 4 children, right, who's a pastor, who is also an organizer? I can't do that. This is impossible. And it was really when I was talking to the executive director of ECHO, the previous executive director of ECHO, Alexandra Pinheiro Shields, about this. And she was talking about self-care and the reality that you just expressed, Reverend Andre, is not unique to you, is that burnout is real. Burnout is real for those in the mental health profession, for those who are pastoring, for those who are organizing. It is real, and it claims lives. People die, there's suicide, there's heart attacks and diabetes, all kinds of things. Health issues are real. And so what are we going to do to prevent that and to take ourselves, our health and our care seriously, and to do something bold, a bold experiment? And she said, let's do it. Let's try it. And I was surprised that she would, say that, but she did. And so I've been able to construct this both with Echo and with my church. And so that I am able to get away. Now, I'm going to say that I have not perfectly lived that out. And there are, and when I first started even trying to take one day of one day, now most people get a weekend, but because I'm pastor and I'm in the pulpit on Sundays, and so I've got church work 3 days a week, and the organizing 3 days a week. One day is all I can get. But it took me 2 years to even be able to take one day. And this was before I got to Echo. Why? Because I kept putting things, oh, well, this person needs me. Oh, maybe I can do this, or maybe I can do that. And it's tough because, there are things that will creep into the schedule. And I say that they creep, but it's really, I've allowed them in, and I've allowed them to take priority over myself. And so it's something that I am continuing to work at. It's not perfect, but it is something that I am intentionally working on, intentionally trying to find ways of restoring. And so I call it restoration. It's not a vacation. It's not just me checking out. It's doing those things that replenish me when I am depleted, when I am tired, when I don't want to see another person. And it's a struggle even to care for my kids. And I'm like, I just go away, right? When my stores are so low, what are those activities that replenish them? And for me, it's, it's meditation. It's riding my bike. It is reading books. It is spending time with my kids when I have the space. Spend time. It's not just caring for them and making sure that they, take baths and are in school and, but those, those slow down, quiet moments, the reading of the stories and the playing of the games without the TV. So those things. And I will also say there's a book called Sacred Rest, which has also been very influential for me as well. There are 7 different types of rest that Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith talks about. So it's a journey, it's a process. I wouldn't say that I have perfected it by any means, but it's an important journey for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I too am learning the importance of taking one day. I'm not yet at the 1 week and the 1 month. I'm at the 1 day mark. And as a matter of fact, I probably scale it down to 1 hour a day, because that's kind of where I am. Finally, and you can tell us where to find you and some of the work that you're doing and how to keep up with you. But before you tell us that, why do you believe it's important to have our faith, not to have faith, but why is our faith or our moral compass important in the decisions that we make on a daily basis?
Yeah, I really see morality not just about what is right, if you will, or wrong, but what is the good? And what is the good that will come from any decision for yourself and for other people? And I believe that love is important. So I'm gonna, from my faith tradition, I think faith traditions are important in that they help us to codify, if you will, those goods? How can we identify with the good? But one, from my tradition as a Christian, when Jesus is asked what the most important commandment is, and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So those are three things: love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. And so it is important for me to think about what the loving thing to do is for myself, for my neighbor, and God as the spirit that holds us all together. That is that power beyond ourselves. What does it mean to love? And so I think that it's important that we have some sense of how we might judge the good in our decision making, and whatever faith tradition or philosophical tradition or wisdom tradition from your culture, because there's a whole lot of mother wit and folk wisdom that is not in our traditional Western religions, but is a source for inspiration, for doing the good, and for loving oneself and humanity and the world. And I think it's important that we identify that for ourselves from whatever the source.
I told you, visitors, I told you this woman is something different. Like, she's in a complete different class and category. Reverend Bernadette, I almost said Reverend Doctor, Reverend Bernadette again. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, if they want to keep up with you?
Oh, so I am so social media challenged. My husband says it is what he said, ministerial malpractice. I am not. I have a Facebook page that I have not visited in literally 10 years. It's on there, but you could send me messages, I would never get them. So, and that's really bad. If you want to contact me, you could email me. My church. So I am the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Lynn. We do have a Facebook page. However, I do not manage it, and it is not managed a lot. And unfortunately, most of the things that are on there are funerals. And and we did have an action, though, that is also on there. We recently hosted an action for an unarmed crisis response team in Lynn. So that's on there. But it's Bethel Lynn Church, or Bethel Church Lynn. If you want to go on Facebook, that would be the only way. So I'm going to tell my email. If you want to email me, you can email me at Pastor Bernadette HM. That's PastorBernadetteHM, as in Hickman-Maynard, at gmail.com. I'm also Rev Bernadette at echoaction.org. That would be the way to get in contact with me.
So, yes. I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No. That's just it. Unfortunately, I know, and this is why I'm a cusp millennial Gen Xer, and so this is more Gen X than millennial. And so maybe I can't blame my my age at all. This is just me, y'all. I'm just not into the social media.
So, friend, sister, I gotta tell you, you are cheating the people with this gift. You need to be on every major social media network, because I am sure the impartation, the gift that you have and that you bring, people would bask in that. So you might want to think of stepping your social media game up. All right, stepping it up. But if you're okay with it, the producer can have your email address just run across the screen. The email that you provided just run across the screen so that persons can see that. My dear friend, my sister, thank you so much.
Thank you. you.
This
Thank
is
you.
amazing. And we can't do this. This is not a one and done thing. We can't just have this conversation and not talk again. So you have to come back and say hi
Absolutely.
to the connectors.
You know how to reach me.
I do. I do. Well, connectors, thank you for taking the time to listen and to connect with Reverend Bernadette Hickman-Maynard. Thank you for opening yourself to us and inviting us a little bit into your world and your faith journey. And when I come back from this side of the program, you will hear my connecting thoughts. But for now, to my dear friend, my dear sister, I say thank you and keep up the good work. Whew. Connectors, didn't I tell you that the Reverend Bernadette Hickman-Maynard, I am tempted, and as you heard, I was tempted so many times to call her the Reverend Doctor, which I think is a title she so humbly and befittingly deserved. Didn't I tell you she was dynamic? She is just a wealth of knowledge and power. It was amazing speaking with my sister, my friend, and hearing from her how her faith requires her to show up. Here are my connecting thoughts. First, I want to say that this program is not just coming from the Christian perspective. I know that the last couple of episodes, we've heard a lot more from the deity or Christolic perspective. But we have some guests that are lined up that, you know, they connect with other supreme. And we will hear their perspective and we will connect with them. As it relates to my connecting thoughts for today, the Reverend said it perfectly. Sometimes to move forward, we have to go back in oppression. And we go back not because we enjoy the oppression. We go back not because we want to continuously be oppressed. We go back to learn the lessons that we missed the first time. We go back to perfect our strategies so that we're never asked to go back a third time. And we go back, most importantly, so that we can see each other. We can hear each other. Sometimes in the hustle and the bustle of it all, we tend to miss the other person, and we believe our perspective is the most dominant or prominent, or should be the most prominent perspective, or the only perspective. And sometimes we stop listening to each other, and our sense of decency, humanity goes out the door. Because how dare you not see what I'm saying? How dare you not feel what I'm feeling? How dare you not agree with my perspective? Connectors, I want to say when it comes to the conversation of choice, it is deeper for me. I know it can't get any deeper than a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to govern her own body. But it's deeper for me than just the right to choose. For me, it is a slippery slope. For me, how far back are we gonna go? What else that the ideologies of a conservative movement doesn't agree with or didn't agree with, that they can now go back and say, you know what? You're no longer a full human being. You are 3/5 human. You know what? You're no longer your own person. You're property of mine. You know what? Because we have a problem with lived experience and we can't seem to hear and we can't seem to understand and we can't seem to talk to each other, maybe we should go back to the days where you stay over here and I stay over here. How far back are we gonna go? And when is okay gonna be enough? And when is enough gonna be too much? Connectors, I implore us. The reason, again, I wanted to do this podcast is because I remember, I spent hours and hours upon Capitol Hill in this country, upon Beacon Hill in this state. talking and fighting, marching and chanting, losing my voice, putting myself in harm's way for the rights, the liberties, the freedom of us all, all of us, but primarily marginalized and historically oppressed individuals, Black and brown, women, indigenous, LGBTQ+. I have spent hours fighting for the continued path to liberation, full, complete, and total liberation. But I am at a point where I wonder, at what point do we all collectively say, enough has become too much? Will it be okay for me to continue living and enjoying the 70% freedom that I have as a Black man? Or will we go back to a time where that 70% becomes 30%? I remember when a Supreme Court justice was nominated, and in that particular justice's confirmation, that particular justice said, they pray, they consult, and they speak with the Holy Spirit when it comes on to decisions and certain things. I remember that. And here we are, not very long after that confirmation, that the Bible, the church, religion is being used to take away the rights, to strip away a little bit more freedom from a certain group of individuals. Connecting through faith is to give us a perspective of how we are all impacted, all of us, by our faith or the faith of others, or the moral compass or lack thereof of others. Friends, connectors, supporters, friends, let us continue to be vigilant, as my good book would say, as wise as a serpent, but as harmless as a dove. We all have a responsibility to be our brothers and our sisters' keeper, whether we agree with their decisions and their personal choices or not. With that, I will say good evening, dear connectors. I look forward to seeing you, to talking with you, to connecting with you next week on our next episode of Connecting Through Faith.